I'm having trouble. Okay.
Okay, Marty, I'm gonna sign off. Have a good meeting, everyone, and have a good night.
Thanks. Good night, Karen.
Good night.
Okay. I'm going to make this someone who'd like to raise their hand to be co-host because I keep seeing a sign says my connection is in jeopardy. And if I crash out, I need someone to let me back in.
I'll do it.
Anybody?
Sure.
I can't find it now. There it is. Okay, so who volunteered?
Me,
Lisa?
yeah, unless someone else wants to do it, that's fine. Yeah, but I'll do it.
Okay, I'm making Lisa co-host. So if I crash out and you don't hear me anymore, which is probably a good thing, then Lisa, you'll be able to keep us going. Okay, item number one in my report is so it would be first, the board approved the ethical guidance manual edition for the protocol for filling midterm vacancies. Just saying that, we know we did it, but in so doing and fixing up and looking to exactly where that would fit into EGM, I realized that the verbiage abstention for cause still existed. So as I mentioned at the last board meeting, I went, and if you go back and check EGM, you should not find for cause anymore. You'll find abstention ineligible to vote. That wasn't too hard. Item C, as you're probably aware, the Special Committee on Racial Equity has requested of all committees to look into areas in which the committee can focus on and work on areas of racial equity. I frankly, I'm going to tell this to Rosemary, I'm pleased that that Mark Friedlander, one of the things that he did was he put into the original EGM that nominating committees are required to consider the vast differences within the board and ensure that all groups are represented. It's to look into, is not a mandate. You must have X or Y number of anyone. But beyond that, I'm personally don't know what we can or should do to make it part of our agenda over a period of time. If anyone has a suggestion, I'd be more than happy to listen to it so we could discuss it. If you have it now, otherwise I'll move on to the next one. But I'll look forward to hearing from whomever has ideas. Next is a rather interesting situation.
Marty, can I just,
Yes.
I'm sorry, just to jump in, and I don't know if this fits the bill here, but since the scree committee has asked us to think about things, there is, and I can look it up for you and send it to you, and you can send it to committee members. And excuse me if I kind of fumble over this because I'm not quite sure I understand it entirely. De Blasio, in the waning days of his administration, and I think it was like December 28th or 29th, there's a press release from City Hall that states that his charter revision commission that he started, he had yet a second charter revision commission to look into, and I don't have the original mandate, but things like racial equity issues. Let's just do generic like that. And his charter revision commission came out with a report, and I think there are 2 or 3 items that are going to be on the November ballot, November 2022. And they are and I hate using it's generically, it is racial equity. It's changing the city charter. Well, once again, I don't want to go into details because I'm gonna get it wrong. I read this some time ago. Maybe that's the kind of thing that our committee could look at and pass on to the SCREE committee and to the board as a whole, just for informational. I mean, it's an informational purposes thing. There are 2 or 3 questions that will be on the November ballot, all dealing with racial equity issues in our city. So anyway, can I, does that, I'm sorry, I'm fumbling with
It's
the
worth looking at.
definition, but
It's worth looking at and to see whether it fits. We can adopt it or not, but we should look at it. You're right. I remember scanning when it first came, the report first came out. Nothing caught my eye in particular.
right?
So what our committee should be focused on in that area, but it's worth looking at.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure it's for our committee to look at the details, but certainly because it's because there are going to be 2 or 3 ballot proposals on the November ballot that deal with racial equity. It seems okay for us to look at it and pass it off to the SCREE committee, not pass it off, but pass it on to the SCREE committee and to the board as a whole for informational purposes, what is being thought of. Okay, sorry. I will look at, I will research, send it to you, and Marty, you'll send it to the committee members. Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't think of this before, but
What you're
okay.
suggesting is certainly appropriate that we do that. My question was a little more focused, though. What as we as a committee should be looking at to enhance the racial equity theme?
Yes,
And I
yes.
may find one there, but the idea of looking at the report and reporting it to the full board so they're aware that these things are coming up is certainly something that's appropriate for us to do.
Good. Good.
Item D, I don't know if it's a tempest in a teapot or not. I raised this issue. I sent it out for everyone to read, more material than I have here, but I'm very much confused by where the line is and how not to cross it. I'm concerned about members of the board who in the past have said appropriately, I have a conflict, I am declaring, I am now going to discuss, I'm going to get back to discuss, and then am I voting? Those are the rules we went by. And then suddenly I find this came out, that a member of Community Board 12 in Manhattan, who is employed with an agency that's in the Fort Washington Avenue Armory, spoke strongly. I'm not sure, it doesn't say, this is the summary by COIB, but I read the full report, and it doesn't say what she said or how she said it, but apparently it was determined that she had crossed the line from using her prerogative to discuss to becoming a representative of. And I'm not quite sure where that line is, but I want to make sure nobody violates it, because as you can see here, she was charged $1,500 in a fine because she crossed that line. Has anyone read it? Does anyone have any opinions to add here? And you will note, and I sent you copies of this also. I'm having trouble with my screen. Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay. I sent Jeffrey Tremblay a letter, which I sent you a copy of, and then I have his response. And he sent me a second example of where the line was crossed. And again, I don't know where the line is. And so the only one we have now with Rosemary, you're the only one with a law degree. Do you know where the line is?
So I gotta think, wait, I can't be the only one with a law degree here. I can't. Reading excerpts of decisions is always a little dangerous. Lawyers always tell you that never render an opinion on minimal information. It would be good to read an entire decision with.
I sent it out, but I'll do it again.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I will certainly say, Marty, that this is the conflict of interest board, right? That we're talking about.
Right.
They're fiercely
Correct.
careful. They are fiercely careful. It's once again, I think the weight has to go on their decision. Not that we have to agree to it, or not that they're always correct, but they really are. Because it's a board. It isn't one individual who's coming up with this. You know, they debate these issues as a board.
We have had people on the board who have
Mhm.
said, I have a conflict of interest. However, I'm going to speak. I have the right to discuss.
Mhm.
And I'm fully in favor of that. I just want to know, when one discusses, how does one cross the line to be representative? It's a violation to represent. It's not a violation to discuss.
Marty, I'm just reading a
Anyhow,
line here from their response to you. And it just says
Yes.
that they appeared, the board member appeared in their capacity as an employee of the Armory, not as a board member. So I think that's the distinction. I don't know. I have to read it more, but.
That's more like what costume she was wearing as opposed to what she was saying.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I will share this again and lay this over for next month.
Camelia is joining. We have that on our board. We have people who have several hats that they wear at the same time.
I agree with Lisa's interpretation.
Mhm.
Yes, that's why I want to be careful. I just want to be careful for their sake that they don't cross that line.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So there are a couple of others, but I focused on, I have 5 altogether, but the first ones I said caught my attention, and I contacted COIB for some explanation. And again, okay, so the next one is, and you worry about the stupidity of some people who go ahead and do these things. So this community affairs representative for the advocate's office used her car to do campaign work. Obviously a violation. And I love how they put it, the now former community affairs representative paid a fine, but also lost their job. Misused deputy commissioner. And was able to get a NYPD employee transferred to work for, I think again, it's her. And the debtor, the employee also owed her money. She made a loan, and there was a relationship that that COIB is defining as, you can't have that kind of relationship and supervise somebody. That's why she is also fined a mere $2,000. Here's one, director of the Department of Health and Hospital Hygiene Interesting. Again, a question of oversight. And she was able to get somebody a job based on a relationship that they had. And so the directors now had to pay a $3,500 fine. But it doesn't say former, the now former IT director. And this one is totally stupid. A principal gave her from the money, the school monies that she had, she hired her husband to do a video production for the school. And that's a relationship that's also not approved. And so she paid $3,000. Again, as I read these, I can't imagine why people are so stupid. From the New York City Council spreadsheet, I sent it out, but the one issue that's of importance that I'm drawing attention to, there are others that are important, but you're all aware by now that the last Tuesday, there were 2 hearings held by the City Council. One was in person, which I didn't go to, and the second was on Zoom, which I observed, I thought most of, but Eric Dinowitz indicated that the meeting went on for 8 hours. I don't know if that included the morning, but I didn't stay on for 8 hours. But while listening to it, the question is, if you recall last year, city planning and DOT came before us with this wonderful idea with no substance that they wanted to get rid of the current language concerning how restaurants and so on could establish sidewalk cafes, get rid of the current language and put in brand new language, but they wouldn't tell us what the brand new language was because they hadn't developed it yet, but they wanted our approval, which I believe we did not give. We wanted more information. So on Tuesday, there was a hearing. I believe DOT, from what I heard, did most of the presentation. They came up with rules. It's important to note that this was on the calendar at the specific request of the mayor. So you know that this has some sense of urgency on their part. DOT indicated, I don't know who the representative was, but DOT indicated that they had not had outside input. They did not ask community boards. They didn't ask anyone their opinions, just came forward that even though they allegedly had some kind of survey asking people their opinions in general. It was mentioned at the second hearing that I was at that people found what they did be totally inadequate. And so DOT says there will be hearings now that this stuff is out. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it. I can send you also the language that they want to put in. The people who spoke at that second hearing had, some of them I had the impression had not read it yet. But the areas that bothered them was that that the DOT has not yet come up with guidelines on what, apparently there was one in Brooklyn where they put up a 2-story structure on the sidewalk. And it took another thing that was, there was one council member who every time a chair, not a chair, come on, what's Kira's title?
District manager.
Thank you. Every time a district manager spoke, this council member wanted to know what experience they had working with DOT. And they all came up with zeros. DOT doesn't talk to them. DOT didn't respond to them. They've made complaints. Nothing happens. In the case of that 2-story structure, it took 6 months of complaining before something was finally done and it was dismantled. So issue of concern is we were concerned about is that when an application comes in, it will be forwarded to the community board. Community boards have a chance to have a hearing. They have a 30-day response period. If they can do three things. One is say, this is fine with us. Two, they can say, this is terrible for us, or this is really bad, but if they make the following corrections, we can live with it. On those two latter ones, the city council or DOT will have their own hearings and decide what they want to do. There was a concern that 30 days may not be enough, especially you would expect a deluge between the old permit holders and those trying to get new permits. So if everyone who currently has a sidewalk cafe sent us all of them applied, and we had to have hearings for all of them, and anyone else who wanted to apply, could whatever committee is dealing with that handle it all within 30 days? It's a question. There was no fee under the current process. Now there'll be a fee. The first initial permit is $1,050, and then you renew it, it is $525. What people were concerned about was the people who were supporting cafes were concerned about, and there were some unions that spoke, that this is a revocable permit. In theory, if a restaurant builds up something on the sidewalk, which costs them money, and they see its value in long-term investment, and then the city decides to revoke it a month later, they weren't particularly happy about that. I can understand that. There were a number of speakers who were concerned about people with handicapping conditions and how there were major concerns of the present ones and what might be in the future, especially again, DOT does not have guidelines yet. They're having some architects come back with a report, and then they'll put out guidelines. But issues such as, will there be electrical cables across the floor, across the sidewalk to get to the structure, so that people who can't walk, wheelchairs, whatever, will have this obstruction, which would be a problem. People driving up with accessoride or whatever, will they be able to get out of the vehicle and get into the structure, be outside? If they're outside, we'll be able to get into the restroom inside the restaurant. They raised some very serious and interesting questions, and I believe this might be the reason I put these down and share them is because these are the kind of questions we should be asking when we hold our hearings concerning whether or not we think this language is viable. And I will stop at this point. Any thoughts, comments?
Marty, just to the extent, are you aware, and I've just asked this because I don't know the answer to this question, how are we going to get to a point where there's a resolution that this board can adopt? What have we heard? Have we heard what committee's going to do this? I mean, the legislation was sent around, if I remember correctly, Marty, from land use. I think Kira sent it around, so I got a copy of it too. Lots of thoughts, like this is a very good analysis of it, but I think a lot of people will have a lot of thoughts on it. But how, do you know which committee is going to come up with a resolution to come to the board so that we can have a position on this? Do you know? It's not your job to know, but do you know?
Well, since it's not my job, I'll happily say I don't know.
Okay, no, that's fine. Then we should, maybe we should, no, okay, fine, okay.
Well, we can bring this up next exec meeting that Laura has to make the decision.
I think you're right. I think you're right. That's.
Belong here, does it belong in land use? Does it belong in
Exactly.
Economic development, I don't know. So I'm happy to say, let Laura decide.
Okay, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Mhm. This was, this was very good and generous of you to sit through that hearing. I read through it too, and there are a number of things that jump out. I'm not going to go into any detail now, but there are a number of things that jump out that raise concern or raise questions. So this is an excellent start. Thank you. Great.
What bothered me is, having read it, and I've answered what their problem is now, they have no guidelines.
I know.
The only guideline they seem to have is that you cannot post banners across the outside of the structure. You can identify the proprietor and the company, but you can't have posters or want ads, whatever out there. It's supposed to be clean, but they haven't said what clean means. How big, how tall, how floppy. There was an aversion to a plexiglass, which I don't blame them, but
But
Is
you know,
guidelines.
Marty, they always say the devil is in the details.
that's
And
why
the devil here, oh my goodness, am I saying this? The devil is DOT. They are the ones who are going to set up the rules and the regulations. That always comes after the legislation. That's the problem. The details are not going to be in the legislation. They are turning this over, instead of consumer affairs, they're turning it over to DOT. They're the ones who are going to come up and answer exactly the questions you're asking, exactly what you're asking. And we won't know that for a while, but yes, okay. Sorry, that's you are spot on everything that you said. Good.
there were a number of speakers who were not pleased with having vehicles there at all. You don't need all those parking spaces, let them block everything. Just have that in mind. I know Chuck was still upset and should be that when his wife was leaving the car on Johnson Avenue, the car door got hit because the roadway is so narrow. So just a thought. Now, this is where I hope we'll spend most of our time.
Marty, there's a hand up.
I'm looking at that. Okay, tell me. Go ahead. Whose hand is up? Go.
It's Camille's hand. Are you taking
Yeah, go ahead, Camilla.
questions? Okay.
Thank you so much, Marty. Hold on, let me turn on my camera. Yeah, so just wanted to share, your review was very good. I actually attended the whole, it was 9 hours of the hearing from 10 in the morning and it stopped like 6:59, the minute before we started our full board meeting. Your description was very accurate. I would like to say that there were a lot of community boards actually that were very nuanced in their arguments, basically having major reservations as to what is on the table right now. And even my own, even if I was a strong supporter at the beginning of this, I'm feeling now much more conflicted personally. But what I wanted to share was that actually in economic development, we had a presentation from DOT. It was fairly detailed and it had a lot of some of these details that you're missing in terms of actually understanding what is being proposed. And for the community board A to have maybe a more nuanced position and maybe like a clear resolution onto what's on the table, it may be worthwhile reaching again to DOT and asking them for like literally a 5-10 minutes presentation in full board one time, because they do have a lot of details that actually would be very useful for all of us to know. So just wanted to put it out there for Laura to potentially consider, because again, economic development knows, because we had Nivaldo Lopez, who unfortunately is no longer commissioner for the Bronx. He was promoted to state. Maybe the deputy commissioner, Keith Cobb, could do it, or somebody else, because there may be a need for all board members to sort of understand what's on the table right now. So just wanted to suggest that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure that when we receive the information from the city for us to evaluate what the plan is, we will invite speakers. to help walk us through this. For the last 2 months, I've raised this, and I'd like to have us move in some direction. At the executive meeting this month and at the board meeting this month, Laura raised the fact that there have been complaints, justifiable complaints, that our meetings have been going on too long. And the idea of having rules, among other reasons, is to ensure that the meetings flow in an appropriate manner, and that we don't stumble by having meetings going on far too long. Community that comes out to discuss something, to be on a late part of an agenda before they have to leave, before it's discussed, it doesn't help anybody. And I agree, meetings are going too long. Having said that, when we discussed this last month, there was a question about, before we establish the rules, we ought to have some general principles. So I put this out for you to look at during the course of the month, last couple of weeks. And hopefully you have some comments, good, better, and different. I'm a big boy, I can take it. So any comments on what I've suggested? Let's talk about just general principles first, then we'll go to general rules, which requires an L. Oh, that was not helpful.
Marty, I didn't hear it before. Did you say you sent this to us or are going to send this to us?
I thought I had.
I don't think so.
I can go back and check. I thought I know I set it up to be sent. I'm sure I sent it to the office to send out. Any rate, another month. Okay. So I asked you to read them. Let's just deal with, there was a request which made sense that there ought to be some general principles on, oh. So if you read general principles and offer any comments.
Isn't that PLE?
That's what it looks like.
Looks good to me.
David, that's what it says, PLE. I mean, if it wasn't sent out, and I presume at this point that it wasn't, though I know I sent it, then we're not going to vote on anything tonight. I just wanted to discuss it and hopefully move to some point where we can get an output. Any question, any idea of additional principles or reduction of these principles or other misspellings? And again, the objective here is not to say every chairperson of every single committee must function in the same way, but to establish a set of principles and guidelines so that every member knows what to expect, every visitor, member of the community knows what to expect.
Yeah, the only one, oh, sorry, Rosemary's hand is up.
Lisa, you started, go ahead.
No, Rosemary raised her hand. I was,
I'm following the rules, right?
right.
I think I haven't had time to reflect on everything that you put together here, Marty, but just a consideration, just a consideration. Do you think it might be useful or helpful for our committee chairs and our members to understand which of these things are required by existing charter, borough president, Office of Open Government, rules and regulations, and those that we as a community board are suggesting? Is there, and once again, I'm not looking and saying that there's a division here, but would it be useful to think about these things in it kind of bifurcated, things that are required, expected of us by rules, regulations, charter, blah, 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 and those things that we as a board want to, I hate to use the word impose upon ourselves or expect ourselves to expect us to do. Does that make sense? Do you understand my question? Okay, just a suggestion. Doesn't make sense. Okay, I'm repeating myself. I apologize.
I'm not aware at this point of any specific rules that COG has put out, says you have to have the following, other than the thing that Dan's been working on has been all speakers need to be treated equally within categories, whatever. And the principle that was discussed last month, which is here, that we encourage and want, community participation. On the other hand, I don't think it's inappropriate to say we'll allow a half hour to this conversation. There was people know in advance, there's a sign-up sheet. And if there's time beyond that, then you allow for more speakers. But people have to know, and I believe that there should be a limit when you say we have a half hour for this, it doesn't go on for 2 hours, which it easily could if there were no rules. Is there a rule you would put in that a speaker only speaks once? Because you don't have that, and the community is there, then I love Chuck's line. If you believe there's you have something to say that hasn't already been said, please. But if you have, no reason to repeat it. The point was made. Lisa?
No, you saw my hand. No, I think it's a great start. I mean, I absolutely believe in principles and, leaving some discretions to the facilitator of the meeting. The one thing I'm not quite sure about is the projected sequence of speakers. It's sort of like things to consider, but I don't know that it's a sequence. That's minutia, but it's a great start. I look forward to looking at it further and, sending any comments.
Elected officials, just by past experience, they seem to be able to speak whenever they raise their hands, regardless of sequence. There's good reasons for that, and there are things not so good reasons for that. Granted, some of you, I take it that you have not received advance copies. But in this limited period of time, has anyone see something we missed? Should include, should remove.
Marty, the only thing, again, it can be footnoted or something, but once you go into ULURP, you have a separate set of rules that are completely different from anything else, that are requirements. So however you want to put ULURP in this, it could be footnoted, but the rules surrounding ULURP hearings are different from anything else. As you may remember, after I was written up in the Riverdale Press for allowing $1,300 for Riverdale Temple hearing because we did not do the hearing correctly. Okay, so there are separate rules for ULURP hearings. And it can say at the beginning, this is the general order of business of the community board. For ULURP rules, and then have a separate thing or have it footnoted or something, but these are not ULURP rules, okay?
Okay, I will look into that. The reason, Lisa, that I put this sequence in is I was thinking of hearings that we've had, that I led way back when under the Padovan law, where we, I mean, there's a sequence in terms of you want the presentation by the agency, you want to hear input from others, and then you want to have the board has to go into a session where the committee go into a session where only they are the ones who are speaking to each other to come to a resolution to vote or not to vote. But that was in my mind as I put the sequence in.
Right. It's just sometimes there's no vote, sometimes it's just a general meeting and, it can be a little looser than this. I mean, or you could call it a principle that before votes are taken, the committee should hear from the community and fellow board members. I don't know. Anyway, I wasn't thinking of,
It was a principle, isn't it? Intense community to encourage as much input from board members and community. I have to move this a second. Community residents as is practicable. I've adapted that
right.
as long as it's practicable. Kelly, I haven't heard from you at all. You have anything to add, please?
I was actually, and then I heard the comment of, I was reminded of Mr. Merdler's comment about if someone has already said something, don't say it. And I subscribe to that theory in my day-to-day professional life because I do meetings all day long. But I like what's written here is clear, is concise, and while there may be some things that can be fleshed out a bit more, I don't see it off the top of my head, but I really like Rosemary's idea of stating what is required, especially as we have a number of new people that are serving as board members, and also people who are new board chairs and people who may not, don't have the tenure that you and Rosemary have. And so things, we're still trying to come up to speed on a lot of this. And so I think that would be helpful, especially if we're giving them a primer, we may as well give it to them in the more basic form.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad I asked.
David has his hand up.
Yeah, Marty,
David, yes.
I like what's here. I'm just wondering if it's the kind of thing that we might preface with that at each meeting, the chair, be it the committee or the board, would state that they reserve the right to do these things. So that, and explain the reason for it because of, trying to be expeditious with everyone's time and all that. But in the chair's opinion, if things are starting to run over, the chair reserves the right to limit this, or this. Is that too
In-
much power?
No, item 5 in principles, which I rolled up to. Does that cover what you have in mind?
No, I'm actually thinking for all of them. You're right, it does address the speakers, but it could be board members, it could be, hell, it could be agency people. You know, if an agency person is droning on,
Okay, which I think what happened, we had DHS when they wanted to talk about what they wanted to talk about, not what we wanted to hear or talk about.
I think that should be within the discretion of the chair. Again, of the
Oh, okay.
committee, of the board, what have you.
I thought in my mind, but I'll fix it. I thought I was thinking of speakers generically. Anyone who speaks, including board members.
Right,
Yeah,
but you know, for example, number 2, time allocated to each agenda item. You know, where the chair could say, all right, we've had a good discussion of pro and con 3 times over. You know, we have 7 other topics tonight. I think it's time to move on. I think actually that is something within the discretion of a chair. Or should be.
Okay, I thought that was in here, but I'll try to clarify that somewhere.
Okay.
And I believe the chair always reserves that right. The chair is the presiding officer. So the chair is charged with, you know, keep moving the meeting along. And
Correct.
so I think it's natural for their position. They, you know, drive the bus, so to speak.
Well, it should be.
The
Yes,
bus
yes,
is
they
fine.
should.
It's question is, when can we throw somebody, when can a chair throw somebody overboard? That's a joke, don't worry.
Whenever he or she wishes to.
Except there's a book that came out about 8 years ago called Good to Great, which talks about getting the people on the bus who you want. And the opposite, obviously, is throwing people off or under the bus. Jimmy, I don't know who you are, and welcome to the meeting. You're a community member, resident? Hello,
Lurker,
Jimmy.
He's muted.
Can't force you to speak, but okay. Thank you for joining our meeting. Is there any other comments on this? Because I will hold this over to next month with a great expectation and hope that we can come to some kinds of conclusions. I use that in plural because there's no one answer.
Marty,
Well,
if
let's
this
see.
hasn't been sent out, can it be sent out? Because I have a great deal of difficulty reading it off the screen.
Okay. I thought it had been sent out, but certainly I'll
I
send it out
haven't seen
again.
it. I have not seen it.
That's what I keep hearing, so it's not just you.
I'd appreciate it, though. It would make it easier for me.
Okay, so I will send this stuff out and give you lots of stuff to read before our next meeting. which oddly enough is on the same day, March 14th. But that's not, that is not going to be Valentine's Day. Again,
Think of it as an
So-
early St. Patty's.
is that true? All right, in the agenda that I sent out, I made the mistake of not getting rid of old business and new business being nothing to report because there wasn't, but that doesn't mean there isn't. So, does anyone have any old or new business to raise?
Not really, but just a reminder that we need to vote on the minutes since we have a quorum. Before
I
we
don't
leave,
believe we have a quorum.
I think we do.
We need 6 people for a quorum. Kelly, Sylvia, Rosemary, Lisa, myself, and David, okay, that makes 6. Okay, we have a quorum.
Omar, yeah,
You what?
Omar. Is here.
Rosemary, your hand was waving?
Oh, yeah, is my
Rosemary?
hand up? Yes, okay, but you want to do the minutes or can
No,
I
no.
just speak?
I
I have
saw you
something, I
waving.
do have something to say. I do have something to say. Okay, it's a follow-up to what I said originally about how the screen committee asks every committee to participate in some fashion. Once again, I'm not using the right words, but I found on my cell phone, and I just sent it to you, Marty, the press release from the mayor's office, and it's the Racial Justice Commission that has three ballot proposals for November. And I'm not going to read them, but just the second one. The second ballot question is to establish a racial equity office, a racial equity plan, and a racial equity commission in the city of New York. That's just the second question. There are 3 questions. I won't go into them. I just sent it to you. I think it's on point. And so anyway, I sent it to you, and if you'd be so kind to send it to the committee members or however we will deal with this. Okay,
I
thank you.
didn't get it yet, but okay.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so are there any comments on the minutes before we conclude? No comments on the minutes. Well, that's good news or bad news? Anyhow. Motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, anyone against accepting the minutes? Minutes have been unanimously approved. And I thank you. I didn't hear any new or old business. And if there is none, I commend you to go back to your whomever and enjoy the rest of the Valentine's Day.
Happy VD.
Thank you. Same
That
to you.
doesn't sound as good as, doesn't sound as good as what I said.
You got my drift.
Have a great evening all. Take care.
Okay,
Thank you, Marty. Bye.
take care all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm,